The morning they brought the excavators, the air inside the greenhouse still smelled like wet basil and warm glass. I was kneeling beside my grandmother's seed trays when I heard my father's truck roll over the gravel. Then my oldest brother laughed. Not loud, not wild, just sure. I looked up in time to see his boot crush the little wooden sign my grandmother had nailed beside the path. Protected in perpetuity. He said it was rotten anyway. Two machine operators waited by the gate. My father stood with a folder under one arm and a pen in his hand. My middle brother waved at the survey flags like he was already opening a ribbon. Neighbors watched from their porches. Nobody stepped in. Nobody asked why a family had to arrive with machines before breakfast. I did not run outside. I did not beg. I set down the trowel, wiped the dirt from my fingers, and looked at the blue tin box resting on the steel work table in the center of the greenhouse. My grandmother made me promise something about that box. If they ever came with equipment, do not stand in front of it. Call the county office now. Most people thought that sign was just one of her habits. A soft old woman saving plants nobody else noticed. They were wrong. Those 4 words had sat there for 12 years. Through rain. Through winter glass. Through every argument at our kitchen table. My brothers called it sentiment. My father called it dead land. My grandmother never argued with them. She only kept records. Dates. Parcel maps. County letters. And once, 3 weeks before she died, she held that blue tin box between us and said one sentence I never forgot. If they come smiling, do not answer the smile. At the time, I thought she meant grief. I thought she meant family. I did not understand she meant paperwork. Outside, my father was already handing someone a pen. My oldest brother kicked the broken sign aside. My middle brother told the operator to move closer. That was the moment I knew something simple. They believed speed could become truth. They had forgotten what had already been written there. Before I tell you what happened when that excavator crossed my grandmother's gravel path, take a second to like this video, subscribe, and tell me where you are watching from. Then come back with me to the first time my family called that greenhouse a burden instead of a legacy. My name is Lena Mercer. I am 29 years old. I live in Ballard, Seattle, Washington. I work as a greenhouse restoration technician. And right now, I am telling you this because the morning my family tried to sell my grandmother's land, they finally learned she had seen them clearly long before I did. I was the youngest child in a family that treated usefulness like a monthly report. My father respected numbers, contracts, and people who spoke with certainty. My brothers learned from him early. They measured worth in resale value, square footage, and whatever could be turned around fast enough to look smart at dinner. I was different in the one way that mattered to them. I stayed. When my grandmother got tired, I lifted trays, repaired vents, checked soil temperature, and logged which native plants still took root in late spring. I knew which glass panel whistled during windstorms. I knew which bench needed a folded shim under one leg. To them, that made me sentimental. To my grandmother, it meant I was paying attention. My oldest brother, Grant, liked to speak first and summarize everything before anyone else could. He had that clean, polished confidence people confuse with competence. My middle brother, Owen, was quieter but worse. Grant sold the story. Owen moved the pieces. My father let both of them talk as if the land had already become theirs in the language that mattered. At family dinners, they called the greenhouse old glass, dead acreage a maintenance hole, a tax drag. I stopped correcting them. Not because they were right. Because I started noticing something my grandmother noticed too. People who want something for less always call it worthless first. She never defended the greenhouse with speeches. She defended it by watching who rolled their eyes, who asked about zoning, who lingered over county maps instead of seed catalogs. I did not understand that then. I only knew she trusted me with work she never handed to them. The trust felt small at first. Water this. Lock that. Keep copies. Remember dates. Do not ignore what they call worthless. By the time my grandmother turned 78, the greenhouse had stopped looking like anything my brothers could brag about. The cedar frame had silvered with age. Some panes still carried faint scratches from storms that came in off Puget Sound. On cold mornings, the glass fogged from the inside first, then cleared in slow patches as the heaters pushed back the damp. Nothing about it looked expensive. Everything about it looked lived in. There was a narrow gravel path down the middle. Benches on both sides. Clay pots. Seed trays. Propagation domes with cracked corners my grandmother refused to throw away. She said useful things did not stop mattering because they stopped matching. Near the back wall stood the misting rack where she kept young ferns and coastal mosses. Along the south side she grew native iris, evergreen huckleberry, and cuttings from plants local schools sometimes borrowed for science displays. She knew the Latin names. I knew the watering schedule. Between us, the place kept breathing. The steel work table sat at the center like an altar nobody admitted was an altar. Its surface was scarred by decades of use. Rust near the edges. Water rings everywhere. That was where she sorted envelopes, sharpened pencils, labeled trays, and kept the blue tin box tucked against a stack of county soil surveys. My father hated that table. He said it made the whole place look temporary. That was his favorite word for anything he wanted gone. Temporary. He used it for the greenhouse, the irrigation lines, the old rain barrels. Even my grandmother's notes, though she had logged every planting cycle for 26 years in hardbound ledgers that still lined the shelf above the sink. Grant would walk through with city shoes and talk about redevelopment like the greenhouse had already lost. Owen would study the property line through the glass and ask questions that sounded casual until you listened twice. Access road. Utility tie-in. Easement width. My father never stopped them. He listened the way men listen when they are already pricing the future. My grandmother never answered directly. She would hand them tea, point at a tray, and ask whether they could tell the difference between a healthy root ball and a failing one. They never could. I could. I could also tell when she began leaving certain papers in plain sight on purpose. Parcel maps folded to the same page. A county envelope with a green stamp. A yellow note tucked under the tin box lid with one phone number and no name. At the time, I thought she was organizing for death. Now I know she was organizing for impact. She was building something my family never understood. A place that looked fragile until someone tried to take it. My family saw old glass. She saw a line no greedy hand would cross twice. And she chose me before they knew there was anything to fight over. The first offer came on a Thursday night. My grandmother had been dead 11 months by then already. Rain tapped the kitchen windows. My father liked weather like that. It made every room feel closed. Private. Decisive. Grant laid a white envelope beside my plate before anyone sat down. Owen set out glasses. My father unfolded his napkin with the calm of a man who thought the hard part had already been handled. Nobody mentioned the greenhouse at first. We ate pot roast. Green beans. Bread that had gone a little cold in the middle. Then my father cleared his throat and slid the envelope closer. He said they had found a buyer. He said the land had finally attracted serious interest. He said this was a practical move for the family. Not for me. For the family. I opened the envelope. Inside was a check and a single page. No explanation of the sale. No breakdown. No line for review. Just a number meant to look generous if you ignored the size of the thing they were trying to erase. Grant leaned back and watched my face. Owen said I should take the check before the market changed. That told me everything. People who are secure do not rush signatures over dinner. I put the page down. I asked one question. Did the buyer receive the full title packet with every recorded restriction attached? Grant gave a small laugh. He said lawyers handle that. I kept looking at him. Not the lawyers, Grant. You. His jaw tightened. My father stepped in then. Smooth voice. Low voice. The one he used when he wanted disagreement to sound childish. He said I was making this emotional. He said the greenhouse had no commercial future. Dead land. Same phrase. Same mouth. Same contempt. I still did not argue. I asked a second question. Did any of you read the recorded restrictions yourselves? Grant stared at me like I had switched languages. Then he said the sentence that changed the temperature in the room. I am not reading all that. It is simple. I looked at the envelope, the check, the bare page, then back at him. If it is simple, read it. Nobody moved. Owen reached for the paper instead of the county file. My father told him to leave it. Grant smiled, but it slipped at the edges. That was the first crack. Not because I had proof in my hand. Because for one clean second, all three of them looked like men standing on a floor they had never tested. The next morning, my father found me in the greenhouse before sunrise. I was checking the vent latches after a night of wind. The broken heater in the east corner had clicked twice, then gone quiet. I had one hand on the frame when he stepped onto the gravel path with Grant behind him and Owen near the door. My father did not waste time. He said the buyer would be on site by 9. He said the survey markers were already approved. He said I needed to stop creating friction where none existed. I closed the latch, turned, waited. Grant folded his arms and looked around the greenhouse the way investors look at buildings they plan to gut while pretending they are saving them. Owen held a clipboard. Fresh pages. New confidence. My father kept his eyes on me. The sale closes today, Lena. I asked, did the buyer see the county file? Grant exhaled through his nose. There she goes again. My father said, we are done discussing paper. That was when I looked at Owen. Then read it out loud. He frowned. Grant gave a short laugh. My father said, you are not in charge here. I nodded once. Then read it yourselves. Grant stepped closer to the work table. His eyes flicked to the blue tin box, then away. He still thought he was the smartest man in the room. Men, like that, always think confidence counts as access. He said, I am not reading all that. It is simple. I held his gaze. If it is simple, read it. Silence. Just the faint rattle of rain on glass and the low idle growl of engines waiting beyond the fence. My father changed tactics. Softer voice. Worse meaning. He said my grandmother loved me, but love did not make me qualified. He said the family had carried me long enough. He said the land needed to become useful. That part almost made me laugh. Useful. As if years of work disappear because a man says the wrong word with enough certainty. I know some of you watching this have heard that tone before. The one that makes cruelty sound responsible. The one that dresses greed up as maturity. If you have, you already know this part. They do not need you to agree. They only need you to doubt yourself long enough to step aside. I did not. I put one hand on the blue tin box. Then I said the only thing that mattered. If the land is yours to sell, why are you afraid of what was recorded on it? Nobody answered. Not Grant. Not Owen. Not even my father then. Outside, an engine revved once. And for the first time, my father's face stopped looking patient and started looking timed. He looked timed because he was not angry, not wounded, just aware that something outside the greenhouse was moving on schedule, and I was the last thing left that had not moved with it. My father glanced toward the fence, then back at me. Grant caught it too. He checked his watch like a man preparing to greet money. Owen stayed near the door with the clipboard pressed to his chest. First, they decide what the story is. Then they say it in a calm voice. Then they repeat it until everyone else feels rude for disagreeing. My father stepped deeper into the greenhouse and lowered his tone. Lena, nobody is taking anything from you. This is a family decision. You have been allowed to care for this place because it mattered to your grandmother. That does not make you the owner of the future. Grant nodded like he was chairing a meeting. He said the buyer planned to bring jobs, cleanup, infrastructure, real investment. Owen said the greenhouse could not meet modern code without major upgrades. Old utility lines, weak drainage, inefficient glazing. I looked at the clipboard in his hands. A purchase summary clipped on top. A site preparation sheet beneath it. A bright orange contractor page. No county packet. No ecological review. No release. I did not reach for it. I only looked long enough for him to notice that I had noticed. He turned the clipboard inward. They were not trying to convince me. They were trying to outrun the record. Grant started listing next steps. Survey this morning. Soil team next week. Ground prep after that. Fence access widened. Then permits. My father put his hand on the steel table. The buyer has counsel. We have counsel. Everything is being handled. I said, then you will not mind showing me the county clearance. Grant laughed. There is no county issue. Then show me the ecological review. Owen shifted his weight. My father answered first. There is no ecological review because there is no reason for one. That was when the room went still inside my chest. Because only two kinds of people say there is no reason to review land before disturbing it. People who know nothing. Or people hoping nobody else does. I looked through the wet glass toward the driveway. A black SUV had pulled in behind my father's truck. Another vehicle behind that. Clean. Corporate. Not local. Grant smiled. Good. They are early. My father turned back to me. Do not embarrass yourself in front of serious people, Lena. The family version of a threat. Do not embarrass us. Do not make this harder. Do not force us to do what we were already going to do. Outside, doors closed. Footsteps crossed gravel. Grant picked up the broken sign from the bench, glanced at the words, then tossed it back down. Protected in perpetuity. He thought the sign had already lost. My father told Owen to bring the file outside. Not the county packet. There was still no county packet. The sale folder. I stepped around the work table before they could leave. Just enough to stop the path without touching anyone. My father stopped. Move, Lena. I said, who signed off on ground disturbance. Grant answered before anyone else could. No. One needs a special sign-off to clear old glass and dead soil. Wrong answer. Not because I corrected him. Because the woman outside heard him. I knew she heard him because her steps stopped just beyond the doorway. A beat later, she appeared beside Owen. Mid-40s. Navy raincoat. Leather folder. Hair pinned cleanly back. My father smiled immediately. Miss Talbot. Sorry for the delay. Family matter. She gave him a polite nod, then looked at me. I must be the family matter. My father said I was his youngest daughter and that I was emotionally attached to the greenhouse. Miss Talbot looked past me into the greenhouse. The benches. The misting rack. The ledgers. The blue tin box. Then she held out her hand for Owen's folder. He gave it to her. She opened the folder right there on the gravel. Purchase contract. Survey layout. Site preparation sheet. Contractor contacts. Too thin. Her eyes stopped moving for 1 second, then lifted. Where is the environmental clearance memo? Grant answered too fast. It is not that kind of parcel. She asked the next question without changing her tone. Then where is the release for the recorded restriction? No one had it. Owen tried to hide behind the attorney. Miss Talbot did not let him. So counsel gave you no written release before mobilization. Grant said there was no real restriction blocking commercial use. That word, real, changed her face. I watched her face change at the word real. Not dramatic. Just colder. She asked, did you bring the county record? My father said the county language was old and likely non-operative. Miss Talbot closed the folder. She did not hand it back. She asked one more question. Has any heavy equipment entered the parcel yet? Nobody answered immediately because everyone suddenly understood that the question mattered more than the answer sounded. Then, beyond the fence, an engine revved. My father turned. Too late. One excavator had already rolled forward through the open gate to line up with the gravel path. Not inside the greenhouse grounds yet, but close enough. Miss Talbot looked at my father for a long second. Then she said, I asked a direct question. Grant said it has only moved into position. She stepped aside from all three of them. The first sign that the buyer was no longer standing with my family. My father tried to recover the room. He said everyone was overcomplicating a straightforward transfer. He said old family land often carried outdated language. He said these things could be cleaned up in closing. Cleaned up. I looked at Miss Talbot and said, ask them for the county file. My father snapped my name. Miss Talbot ignored him. She asked Owen whether he had the file on site. He said no. She asked whether anyone had confirmed a release from the recorded restriction before mobilizing equipment. Grant said again that the restriction was not real in any practical sense. Miss Talbot stepped back toward the gate and took out her phone. My father moved toward her. You do not need to do that. We can handle this internally. She looked at him over the phone screen. That depends on what this parcel is bound by. Then she walked 3 steps away to make her call. Grant rounded on me the second she turned. What did you tell her? I said, Nothing she did not already ask. Owen finally stopped pretending he was calm. He looked at my father like he wanted instructions that could still save him. My father did not give any. Looking at the SUV, the excavator, the buyer on the phone, the broken sign, the blue tin box under my hand. Then he tried one more story. He said my grandmother loved symbolic gestures. He said she was brilliant with plants, but not with development law. He said I had misunderstood what she left behind. I opened the blue tin box. Not all the way. Just enough for the county envelope with the green stamp to show. Owen saw it first. His face changed before he could stop it. Grant saw Owen's face and then the envelope. My father saw both. I said she understood exactly what she left behind. Nobody spoke. Rain tapped the roof in small, hard bursts. At the gate, Miss Talbot was still on her phone. Another engine sound came from the road beyond the trees. Then another. I lifted the yellow note from beneath the lid. The one with the number and no name. I reached for my phone with both steady hands. My father took one step forward. Lena. Just my name. No argument left inside it. I met his eyes, reached for my phone, and remembered exactly what my grandmother had told me. Do not stand in front of it. Call the county office. So I stopped speaking to my family and started speaking to the system. The county dispatcher answered on the second ring. I gave the parcel number first. Then the address. Then the name recorded on the yellow note. I said heavy equipment had entered a protected parcel without county clearance and that the buyer had no release document on site. My voice did not shake. Facts travel farther than panic. The dispatcher asked who I was. I said Lena Mercer. Recorded family stewardship successor for the Mercer greenhouse parcel. Then typing. Then a new voice joined the line. Male. Precise. He asked whether any ground had been disturbed. I told him an excavator had crossed the gate line and moved into position on the gravel approach. He asked whether the buyer had been informed of a recorded restriction. I said yes. Their representative was already asking for the county file. He told me to stay where I was. Not in the way. Just there. When I ended the call, my father was watching my hand. Grant tried to smile. He said I was creating theater from old paperwork. Owen did not speak. Miss Talbot came back from her own call with a face that had lost every trace of courtesy. She kept Owen's folder tucked against her side and asked my father whether he had disclosed all recorded land use restrictions before contract execution. My father said the property was still under family review at the time of signing. Not an answer. She asked again. Did you disclose every recorded restriction? Grant cut in. There is nothing on that land that cannot be fixed after closing. That was the sentence that ended them. Not because I responded. Because the first county vehicle turned into the drive before the last word left his mouth. White SUV. County seal on the door. Behind it came a second vehicle from environmental compliance, and then a sheriff unit with lights off and purpose on. Nobody in my family moved. The engine shut down one by one. Doors opened. Rain tapped the hoods. A man in a brown county jacket walked straight to the gate carrying a tablet inside a weather sleeve. A woman with an environmental badge followed him. The deputy stayed half a step back and watched the excavator first. The county officer asked who had authorized equipment entry. Grant answered immediately. I did. The officer turned his tablet slightly and asked, on whose determination that no restriction applied. Grant glanced at my father. My father stepped in with that same controlled voice. This is private family land. There has clearly been confusion about some old filing language. The officer did not even look at him yet. He asked Grant again. Who told you no restriction applied? Grant said the language was outdated and non-operative. The officer finally raised his eyes. Then show me the recorded release. No one had it. Miss Talbot said, we requested that before mobilization. Her voice was flat now. Corporate. Clean. Distance already built in. The environmental officer asked the operator to shut off the excavator fully and step away from the parcel edge. Then she asked whether any soil samples, trenching, or material staging had begun. When the operator said no, she nodded once and wrote that down. One mercy. The county officer tapped the screen and read. Recorded perpetual conservation easement. No industrial development. No chemical storage. No commercial ground disturbance without county ecological review. Family stewardship successor listed as Lena Mercer. He turned the tablet so Miss Talbot could see. Then he read the recording number out loud. It sounded like metal hitting concrete. Real. Dated. Filed. Enforceable. My father tried one last turn. He said my grandmother never intended to block responsible development. The officer answered, "Intent does not override recording." Then he looked at me. "Ms. Mercer, have you maintained the parcel continuously since succession?" I said yes. He nodded. That was all. No praise. No speech. Just structure recognizing structure. The environmental officer posted a work stop notice at the gate. The deputy spoke quietly with the operator, and the machines backed out one at a time. Miss Talbot stepped aside and called her legal team. Grant looked smaller with each sentence he could not control. Owen stared at the wet gravel like it had betrayed him personally. My father looked at me then. Not angry anymore. He said, "You would do this to your own family." I closed the blue tin box. Then I answered him in the only language he had ever respected. "I did not do this to the family. Grandma already wrote the boundary. You crossed it." No one said anything after that. They could not. The land had answered for me. The chemical company terminated the deal before noon. Not next week. Not after review. That day, Miss Talbot never raised her voice. She did not need to. By 11:30, her legal team had sent a notice of suspension, a demand for disclosure records, and a reservation of claims tied to misrepresentation, mobilization costs, and site access expenses. My father read the email twice at the kitchen table and still acted like tone could save him. It could not. Grant spent the first 48 hours calling everyone except the people who mattered. He called the survey firm, the contractor, their attorney, a friend in commercial lending who stopped sounding friendly after hearing the parcel number. He kept saying the same sentence. This was supposed to close clean. That was the problem. He had confused momentum with ownership. Owen tried to salvage details. He asked whether the county would accept a corrective filing. He asked whether the easement could be narrowed, amended, reinterpreted. He asked questions the way men do when they have finally realized the wall is real and are still hoping it is negotiable. It was not. 3 weeks later, the chemical company filed formal claims. They wanted back every advance tied to pre-development work, survey deposits, legal review costs, equipment mobilization fees, internal engineering hours. My father called it aggressive. Their counsel called it predictable. By then the bank had started asking its own questions. Grant had leveraged against a vacation cabin on Lake Chelan to cover his share of another project. When the sale collapsed and the claims hit, he lost room he thought he had. The cabin went on the market in early October. I saw the listing by accident. Fresh photos. New. Description. Same doc. Owen lost the townhouse he had put a deposit on in Bellevue. He had counted on the land sale proceeds before the funds existed. That was his habit. Spending certainty he had not earned yet. My father changed the fastest. Not morally. Visually. He stopped talking about vision and legacy and started carrying around envelopes with payment schedules inside. He stood longer at the sink. Sat quieter at dinner. Looked older under the kitchen light. For the first time in my life, he looked like a man who had discovered that authority does not survive documentation. And the rain kept coming. No one apologized to me. That mattered less than people think. Apologies are useful when they come before consequence. After consequence, they are usually just weather. The county follow-up took months, but the boundary held. The greenhouse remained protected. The work stop order became a permanent warning in every file connected to that parcel. No industrial use. No commercial disturbance. No chemical storage. Nothing moved unless the structure that protected it said so. I replaced the broken sign myself. Same words. Protected in perpetuity. I sanded the wood on a gray Sunday morning and sealed it against the rain. Then I mounted it beside the gravel path where my grandmother had put the first one. The greenhouse looked the same after that, which is how real victories usually look. Quiet. Intact. still breathing. In spring, the native iris came back strong along the south wall. The vents whistled in one corner until I fixed the loose hinge. School kids came through in April for a pollinator lesson, and one little boy pressed his hand to the glass and asked who built this place. I told him my grandmother did. Then I went back to work. That is what people misunderstand about boundaries. They are not punishment. They are the moment value stops being available to people who only noticed it when they could not take it. Now I have a question for you. If your own family only respected the truth after a county officer read it out loud, would you still call silence loyalty, or would you protect what was yours? Tell me in the comments. I read every one.